Hey everyone. Today we are going to solve one of the problems that we saw on our channel in a mock interview. So the goal for this is to make sure that we can kind of follow the thought process that you can go through when you are in a mock interview or an interview. So to start off, I have a question pasted in at the top there, and the general idea for this one is that you're going to be given a list like this on line 5 here, where every element appears twice except for one. And the goal of the function is to return the element that only appears once. So in this case here, as you can see, 1 only appears one time, so we want to return 1. And down here, we have 4 appearing once, and we want to return 4 there. So the first thing that should jump at you is that you can tell that there's has to be some sort of counting here, because we're basically counting how many times elements appear. So for this, 2 appears twice and 1 appears once, therefore the answer is 1. So whenever you hear this, the first thing that should jump into your mind is to use a dictionary in Python or a hash map in other languages. So start off, we'll just make sure we have our function definition. It's always very important to make sure that your function definition is descriptive so that the interviewer knows that you know how to write code that can be read by other people. And make sure your variable names are also pretty descriptive. Don't just use a and x and y everywhere, because that can be really hard to follow, especially if you don't get the solution right away. Debugging that with your interviewer, that might be very hard if it's tough to follow the names of your variables and things like that. So as I mentioned, the first thing that jumps out at me is to create a dictionary where we're going to store the number as the key and the count as the value. So the first thing we have to do is populate that dictionary. So to do that, we can just say for num in nums, and remember that nums is our input list here. This is a list of numbers like here. And if the number is not already in the dictionary, so if num not in our dictionary, then we want to assign a new key of that number and the count of 1. So we can say that at this number, we assign the count to be 1. Otherwise, this means that we've already seen this number, so it's a number that appears twice. We can just increment the value we see here by 1. So after this step, we've already populated our dictionary, and we know that every number and its associated count is going to be in there. So because our goal is to return when the count is 1, all we have to do now is just iterate through our dictionary and see where the value is 1 and then return that key. So to do that, we can say for key val in our dictionary and dot items. So this will basically allow us to iterate through the entire dictionary um, with the key and the value for each iteration assigned here on line 23. So all we do now is we just have to see whenever our value equals 1, we just return that key. So if the val is 1, we return our key. So why don't we just run this to make sure that we have the correct thing here. And I'll run this with 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. So in this case, we hope that this returns 3. And as you see, down here at the bottom, we get 3. So now this is a pretty good solution. Using the hash map will show that you know a little bit about data structures. But for this one, our time complexity is going to be O of n, because we are big O of n, because we are looping through this operation here is going to be O of n, and then looping through our dictionary, that'll be another O of n operation down there. So that'll keep our time complexity as O of n. But the problem is here, our space is also going to be O of n because we're creating this dictionary. So after you came to the solution, hopefully pretty quickly, the interviewer might mention something here saying, the linear time complexity, so our time of O of n of linear time is great, but how can we do this without using any extra memory? So at this point, this is a bit of an aha moment. There's a bit of a catch, but there's a pretty nice trick that you can use. So what you can do actually is the XOR operator for bitwise operations. So if we had a number like this and we XOR these together, then our answer is actually going to be all zeros. So basically, one of the traits of the XOR operator is that if you XOR any number with itself, then it will cancel out. So if you just go through and XOR every number in a list, in this case here we have 2 and 2, these will cancel, and then if we XOR 0 with 1, we're going to get 1, which will return 1 there. So this is going to remove the need to have our dictionary, so no extra space is needed, and we can still maintain our linear time complexity. So to do that, we can start by just declaring some result, and this is what we're going to return. And now we just have to loop through our list. So for num and nums, and at every step, all we're doing is just XORing our result with the num that we're currently at. And at the end of our function, we can just return our result. So again, we can just print unique element, and we can run it with the same input we just had. Go ahead and run that, and we get 3 again. So now, a lot of times you can think of things like edge cases and other things that could go wrong, but because this question very explicitly says that every element appears twice except for one, you know that there's going to be a solution. So it'd be great to mention, maybe we have to catch for an empty list or something like that. But because the question is very explicit in what you're going to be provided, this would be a great solution here, where now we get our space time, or I'm sorry, our space complexity down to constant, with only this result that we return at the end being what we have to add. So if you could get both of these solutions and explain them well and explain why this XOR operator, which again is a bit of a catch, but it is very useful when you're dealing with finding unique elements or basically trying to isolate something at the bitwise level. But now, say if you're going for a Python job specifically and they want you to be a master of it, there is a fun little trick that you can do with these different imports I have here. So if you're familiar with MapReduce functionalities in Python, then you can actually do this in one line. So again, we're just trying to find the element that appears once. Now in that last solution there, we had our XOR we laid it out, we did it iteratively through the list and XORed every time. But in Python with the MapReduce functionalities, we can actually just return reduce with the operator XOR and then nums. So this is really doing the same thing. If you get into parallelizing things, you use like Hadoop or something like that, then MapReduce is going to be really familiar to you. If it's not, don't worry about it. But basically, this is calling XOR over all of these nums, if you want to think about it like that. So again, we'll just print this one last time here with our input. And then hopefully this will return 3. And again, we get 3. And I'll actually run this with something else so that you know it's not just, let's run this with, put 100 in there. So now we have 1, 2, 3 is repeated, and it should return 100, and we get 100. So in terms of any tips to solve this and other interview problems, every time that you want to test it, I would make sure that you say out loud what you expect the return to be, just so that way you and the interviewer, because especially if you go down a path that the interviewer may not be familiar with, it'd be great to make sure that at every step that you guys are on the same page. Yeah, overall, I'd say first step is to get to that brute force solution. You could do this probably with a nested for loop as well to get n squared time complexity, but I think the dictionary is a lot cleaner and it shows that you know that data structure. And then in this problem, obviously the XOR is sort of that catch to get your space complexity down and to have your runtime stay linear.